Okay, I didn't mark it down where we end other day. July 11, I think that Prabhupada is lecturing and the goldsmith, he was sitting there. I think let's read it up. I will give you a practical example of how things are misinterpreted. Just like our president, Mr. Goldsmith, he knows that expert lawyers, by interpretation, can do so many things. When I was in Calcutta, there was a rent tax passed by the government, and some expert lawyer changed the whole thing by his interpretation. The government had to reenact a whole law because the purpose was foiled by the interpretation of his lawyer. So we are not out of foiling the purpose of Krishna, for which Bhagavad Gita was spoken. But unauthorized persons are trying to foil the purpose of Krishna. Therefore, that is unauthorized. All right, Mr. Goldsmith, you can ask anything. Mr. Goldsmith stand, and to the surprise of the people gathered, he make a short announcement asking for signers on an incorporation document for the Swami's new religious movement. Prabhupada, they are present here. You can take the address now. Mr. Goldsmith, I can take them now, yes. Prabhupada responded, yes, you can. Bill, you can give your address, and Raphael, you can give yours, and Don, Roy, Mr. Green. As the meeting breaks up, those called on to sign as trustee come forward, standing around in the little storefront, waiting to live curiously through the pages the lawyer has produced from his theme attaché, and to sign as he directs. Yet, not a soul among them is committed to Krishna consciousness. Very good. Mr. Goldsmith made his quota of signers, a handful of sympathizers with enough reverence toward the Swami to want to help him. The first trustee, who will hold office for a year, quote, until the first annual meeting of the corporation, unquote, Michael Grant, who put down his name and address without ever reading, seriously intend to undertake any formal duty as a trustee of the religious society. But they are happy to help the Swami by signing his fledgling society into legal existence. According to law, a second group of trustees will assume office for the second year. They are Paul Gardiner, Roy, and Don. The trustee for the third year are called Jurgens, Bill Epstein, and Raphael. None of them know exactly what the half a dozen legal size type page mean, except that, quote, Swamiji is forming a society, unquote. Why? For tax exemption, in case someone gives a big donation, and for other benefits an official religious society might receive. But these purposes hardly seem urgent or even relevant to the present situation. Who is going to make donations, except maybe for Mr. Goldsmith, who has any money? But Prabhupada is planning for the future. And he is planning for much more than just tax exemption. He is trying to serve his spiritual predecessors and fulfill the scriptural prediction of a spiritual movement that is to flourish for 10,000 years in the midst of the age of Kali. Within the vast Kali age, a period which is to last 432,000 years, the 1960s are but an insignificant moment. The Veda describes that the time of the universe revolves through a cycle of 4 seasons or yugas. And Kali Yuga is the worst of time, in which all spiritual qualities of the man diminish until humanity is finally reduced to a bestial civilization, devoid of human decency. However, the Vedic literature foretells a golden age of spiritual life, beginning after the advent of Lord Chaitanya and lasting for 10,000 years. An eddy that runs against the current of Kali Yuga, with a vision that soars up to the end of the millennium and beyond. Yet with his 2 feet solidly on the ground of Second Avenue, Prabhupada has begun an international society for Krishna consciousness. He has many practical responsibilities: paying the rent, incorporating his society, and paving the way for a thriving worldwide congregation of devotees. Yet, he doesn't see his humble beginning as limiting the greater scope of his divine mission. He knows that everything depends on Krishna. So whether he succeed or fail is up to the Supreme. He has only to try. What a nice instructions for all of us. We just need to try our best. We should leave the result to Krishna. And even if it's a failure, Krishna will appreciate our effort. The purpose stated within ISKCON's article of incorporation revealed Prabhupada's thinking. There were 7 points, similar to those given in the prospect for the League of Devotees he found in Jhansi, India in 1953. That attempt had been unsuccessful, yet his purpose remained unchanged. So 7 purposes of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness are as follows. A. To systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large and to educate all people in the technique of spiritual life in order to check the imbalance of values in life and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. B. To propagate a consciousness of Krishna as it is revealed in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. C. To bring the member of the society together with each other and nearer to Krishna, the prime entity, thus to develop the idea within the members and humanity at large that each soul is part and parcel of the quality of Godhead Krishna. D. To reach and encourage the Sankirtan movement, congregational chanting of the holy name of God as revealed in the teaching of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. E. To erect for the member and for society at large a holy place of transcendental pastimes dedicated to the personality of Krishna. F. To bring the members closer together for the purpose of teaching a simpler and more natural way of life. G. with a view toward achieving the aforementioned purpose, to publish and distribute periodicals, magazines, books, and other writing. So these are the 7 wonderful to remember. Regardless of what ISKCON charter member thought of the society's purposes, Prabhupada saw them as imminent realities. As Mr. Rubin, the subway conductor who had met Prabhupada on a Manhattan park bench in 1965, had noted, quote, "He seems to know that he would have temples filled up with devotees. There are temples and books," he said. "There are existing, they are there, but the time is separating us from them." Haribol. So Prabhupada has already the vision. Haribol. The first purpose mentioned in the charter was propagation, preaching, was the word Prabhupada most often used. For him, preaching had a much broader significance than mere sermonizing. Preaching meant glorious, selfless adventure on behalf of the Supreme Lord. Lord Chaitanya had preached by walking all over southern India and causing thousands of people to chant and dance with him in ecstasy. Lord Krishna has preached the Bhagavad Gita while standing with Arjuna in his chariot on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Lord Buddha had preached, Lord Jesus has preached, and all pure devotees preach. ISKCON's preaching would achieve what the League of Nations and the United Nations had failed to achieve. Quote, "Real unity and peace in the world," unquote. ISKCON workers would bring peace to the world deeply afflicted by materialism and strife. They would systematically propagate spiritual knowledge, knowledge of the non-sectarian science of God. It was not that a new religion was being born in July of 1966. Rather, the eternal preaching of Godhead, known as Sankirtan, was being transplanted from east to west. The society's members would join together, and by hearing the teaching of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, they would come to realize that each was a spirit soul, eternally related to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They would then preach this to humanity at large, especially through Sankirtan, the chanting of the holy name of God. ISKCON would also erect a holy place of transcendental pastime dedicated to the personality of Krishna. Was this something beyond the storefront? Yes, certainly. He never thought small. He seems to know that he would have temples filled up with devotees. He wanted ISKCONs to demonstrate a simple, more natural way of life. Such a life, Prabhupada thought of the village of India, where people live just as Krishna has lived, was most conducive to developing Krishna consciousness. As I was saying in my Bhagavatam class, that just think about the life in India, that we never had any relatives live more than 2 miles away. So any message or gathering, people just go on the bullock cart or walk and transmit all these messages. They don't have to take airplane, train or buses. And the other amazing thing was that nobody was deprived of the work. Everybody was finding the job within 2 miles. Isn't it wonderful? Now the people has to leave the cities to find a job. So how wonderful that economy was, that everybody has their work. They don't have to go beyond 2 miles of the radius. That's Krishna's arrangement. And if we follow that principle, simple life like that, then the economy will be so nice that nobody has to leave their town and village. Krishna gives empty things, ample thing, not empty, ample thing to survive if we have faith in his words. But we want to prove ourselves that we can maintain our life nicely. So Krishna said, okay, go ahead and try to achieve that. So the society's member would join together, and by hearing the teaching of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, everybody will come together and live peacefully. He wanted ISKCON to demonstrate a simple, more natural way of life. Such a life, Prabhupada thought of the village of India where people live just as Krishna has lived. There is no paved road in Vrindavan. Krishna never wear the shoes. Remember the pastimes that when the mother Yashoda was telling gopis, requesting that there are so many thorns, why don't you wear? And what Krishna responded? That you make the shoes for all my cows. Each cow has 4 legs. And Nanda Baba has 900,000. So 900,000 times 4, 3,600,000 shoes just for cow. And then all the animals and all the human beings, you make them, and then I will wear it. This is the real. And now we are learning that acupuncture, that all the points for the healthy, to keep our body healthy, all the points are in our feet. So if you walk barefooted on the uneven surface and with grass, so many, I remember my childhood, that in the monsoon season you walk on the green grass and you will never get a glasses, your eyes. Even it says that when there is a dew on the green grass, you walk barefoot, your glasses prescription will go down. So who has the time to walk? That is the problem. We have made our life so busy, occupied, that we have no time for our own self. Haribol. And all 6 of these purposes would be achieved by the 7th. ISKCON would publish and distribute literature. This was the special instructions Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has given to Srila Prabhupada. He had specifically told him one day in 1932 at Radha Kund in Vrindavan that if you ever get any money, publish books. Hare Krishna. Certainly none of the signers saw any immediate shade to the Swami's dream. Yet these 7 purposes were not simply theistic, rhetoric invented to convince a few New York state government officials. Prabhupada meant to enact every item in the charter. Of course, he was now working in extremely limited circumstances. Quote, the principal place of worship, located at 22nd Avenue in the city, country, and state of New York, was the sole headquarters for the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Yet, Prabhupada insisted that he was not living at the 26th Avenue, New York City. His vision was transcendental. His Guru Maharaj has gone out from the traditional holy places of spiritual meditations to preach in cities like Calcutta, Bombay and Delhi. And yet Prabhupada would say that his spiritual master had not really been living in any of those cities, but was always in Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, because of his absorption in devotional service. Very well. So we can create a very nice atmosphere even within Houston and within the North America, that we should feel that we are living in the transcendental Brajadham. Similarly, the place of worship, 26 2nd Avenue, was not a New York storefront, a former curiosity shop. The storefront and the apartment had been spiritualized and were now a transcendental heaven. Society at large could come here. The whole world could take shelter here, regardless of race or religion. Plain, small, and impervious as it was, Prabhupada regarded the storefront as a holy place of transcendental pastimes dedicated to the personalities of Krishna. It was a world headquarters, a publishing house, a sacred place of pilgrimage, and a center from which an army of devotees could issue forth and chant the holy name of God in all the streets in the world. The entire universe could receive Krishna consciousness from the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which was beginning here. In Keith, Kirtanand Swami Maharaj, Prabhupada had a serious follower. Within a week of their meeting, Keith had moved out of the Mott Street apartment and was living with Prabhupada. He still dressed in his ragged denim shirt and a t-shirt, but he began to do all the Swami's shopping and cooking. While in India, Keith had learned some of the etiquette of a reverence toward a holy man and the principle of discipleship. His friends watched him curiously as he dedicated himself to the Swami. So Keith Kirtanand Swami explained in his own words as follows. I saw that he was cooking, so I asked him if I could help. And he was very happy at the suggestion. The first couple of times he took me shopping, and after that I mostly did it. He showed me how to make chapatis without a rolling pin by pressing out the dough with your fingers. Every day we would make chapatis, rice, dal, and curries. So Keith became the dependable cook and housekeeper in Prabhupada's apartment. Meanwhile, at the Mott Street apartment, the roommate's favorite topic for discussion was their relationship with the Swami. Everyone thought it was a serious relationship. They knew Swamiji was Guru, and when they heard that he would be giving daily classes at 6 a.m. up in his apartment, they were eager to attend. So Kirtanand Swami Keith is explaining in his own words. I used to walk along the Bowery and look for flowers for him. When there were no flowers, I would take a straw or some grass. I love going over there in the morning. Patram pushpam phalam toyam. You offer even the leaf, Krishna accepted. Howard, I would walk very briskly over to Swamiji's chanting Hare Krishna, feeling better than ever before. Miraculously, the Lower East Side no longer looked drab. The sidewalks and buildings seems to be sparkle, and in the early morning, Before the smoke set in, the sky was red and golden. Chuck, he explained in his word that I brought a few grapes and came to the door of the Swami. This was all new. Previously, I would always walk toward McDougal Street, toward Bohemia, aesthetic New York. And now I was walking to the Lower East Side toward the business district, where there were no freaks, artists, or musicians, but simply straight buildings. And somehow, outside the carnival atmosphere, there was the richest attractions for the senses and the heart. So Howard explained in his own word, I would sing all the way to the fire. Then ring the buzzer marked A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, and the door would buzz and open, and I would walk through the hallway into the small patio and up to his small second floor apartment, tiptoeing quietly so as not to wake up the neighbors. Chuck explained, I came into the hall of his building and there were many, many names printed on plaque over the mailboxes. I immediately found the name A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, handwritten on a slip of torn paper, slipped into one of the slots. I rang the buzzer and waited. After a few moments, the door buzzed loudly, and I entered through the security lock. I walked through the small garden into the rear building and upstairs. Prabhupada held his classes for almost 2 months in the privacy of his room. The same room where he typed and talked to guests. To Keith, it was not simply a class in philosophy, but a mystical experience of sweetness. Keith explained in his own word, the sound of his voice, the sun coming up. We had chanted for a few minutes, softly clapping hands, and Swamiji would speak. The thing that got me most was simply the sound of his voice, especially while he was chanting Sanskrit. It was like a music to my ears to hear him speak the raw sound. So as not to disturb the neighbors, Prabhupada would say, chant softly. And he asked the boys to clap softly, so softly that their hand barely touched the ribbon. Then he would chant the prayers to the spiritual master, Sansara Dava Nabalita Loka. The spiritual master is receiving benedictions from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it. California is realizing this thing. So the spiritual master extinguishes the blazing fire of material existence with his eyes closed. He sat singing softly in the dim morning light. The few who attended, Keith, Howard, Chuck, Steve, Wally, sat entranced. Never before had the Swami been so appreciated. So Chuck is explaining in his own word. The Swami was sitting there, and in the morning he would look not shiny and brilliant, but very withdrawn. He looked as if he could sit like a stone, maybe forever. His eyes were only 2 tiny slits of glistening light. He took out his kartals and played lightly on the edge. 1, 2, 3. And he began to sing in a deep voice. that was almost atonal in its intervals. It was a melody, monotone, that did not express happiness or sadness. A timeless chant that told no story. We chanted along with him as best as we could, but several times Swamiji stopped and said softly. After about 30 minutes of chanting, we stopped. Then he opened his eyes wider and said, quote, "We must chant softly because sometimes the neighbors are complaining." I think we need to learn how to chant softly, especially in the assembly of the devotees. We don't want to disturb their chanting. We should always think about other devotees, that they should be able to hear their chanting. After singing, just one paragraph I will read. After singing, the Swamiji would give one of the boys a copy of Dr. Radhakrishna's edition of Bhagavad Gita to read aloud from. He would correct their mispronunciation and then explain each verse. Because there were only a few people present, there was always ample time for everyone to discuss the philosophy. The class would sometimes run an hour and a half and cover 3 or 4 verses. Hare Krishna. So we should stop here. The devotees has to take up their household duties. So before they go, we would like to offer our humble obeisances at the dusk of their feet. Vanchakalpatarubhasya kripasindubhayavacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you very much. And if you have any question, comment, corrections, just